Hey, I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films, and we are getting dangerously close to Halloween. Now would be a good time to go ahead and like this video. Just go ahead and hit that like button just below the video here. I'd appreciate that. Today we're going to talk about a new Scream, well, not new, it's from last year, 2023, Scream Factory 4K release of a 1985 horror film, Stephen King's Silver Bullet. Based on a Stephen King novella called The Cycle of the Werewolf. Now, the first time I saw the cycle, well, I didn't see it because it's a book. The first time I read the book, I remember in the town I lived in, I went to the library there. I was pretty young at the time, but I was able to ride my bike there, and I found it was like a hardback novella of the Cycle of the Werewolf, and it has a lot of pictures in it. So it was kind of, at the time I thought that was pretty cool. It was illustrated fairly nicely. It's fairly short, and it was originally based on a calendar before Stephen King wrote the stories. But the idea behind it was 12 months. Every month there's a full moon, and the werewolf comes out in this small town, and he kills people pretty much. As it goes on, eventually there's a kid in a wheelchair that he attacks on the 4th of July, but the kid has a firecracker, and he sets it off, and it goes into the werewolf's eye, and then messes it up. And so later on he's able to identify who the werewolf is because he's wearing an eye patch. And it basically does 12 months, and then there's in December in the book, it ends there. The movie doesn't do 12 months. I guess they thought it would be too cumbersome to try to cover it in that way. It does about. It starts in the spring and it ends on Halloween, and they write it in a way so the werewolf doesn't have to have a full moon in order to change into a werewolf. So they're able to condense it and not have to go through a whole year of werewolf kills. But it kind of follows the same story, and it has some of the better kills are in the film. The movie stars Corey Haim, and this is one of his early roles. He's very young in it, and he plays the kid who's in a wheelchair named Marty. It kind of follows his reaction to the things going on in the town. And at first it's like he's not necessarily involved with what's going on with the werewolf, and later on one of his friends is killed by the werewolf. So, and then like in the novella, he does encounter the werewolf, but they change it so it's not in July, it's in September. But he's got some fireworks and he shoots one off, and it does go into the eye of the werewolf. It also stars Gary Busey as his uncle. Gary Busey he's pretty good in this, and he's fairly likable. That he's a kind of an uncle who's going through. He's kind of the fun uncle who shows up every now and then and brings gifts, and he just he's just there to have a good time. But he's going through a divorce earlier on, and he comes over, and at that point they say he's drinking heavily, but you see him drinking a little bit, but he doesn't go over the top with it. But eventually the Marty character confides in the uncle about the werewolf, and the uncle helps him make a silver bullet. There's also the silver bullet is also the kid's wheelchair. The uncle gets him a brand new wheelchair that's almost like a motorcycle wheelchair that he's able to drive down the road really fast. By the way, this kid, he's got to be really young. He's definitely under 15, but he's able to drive around in the wheelchair he's in a wheelchair to begin with. He goes places in the wheelchair by himself. You think people would be a little more concerned about him, even during the 80s. I remember as a kid I was able to go about on a bike, but someone in a wheelchair, you think there would be a little different scenario. But also on top of that, there's all these werewolf killings going on. You think people would be very concerned about that. Another major character in the movie is his sister, played by Megan Follows, and Megan Follows around the same time. I guess she played Anne in Anne of Green Gables and its sequel miniseries. But she's pretty likable in this, and she's also the narrator of the film. But also Terry O'Quinn, who I knew him originally from this and the Stepfather movie. But he played John Locke on Lost, where most people will know him from. He does an awesome job on Lost, but here he does a good job too. He plays the town sheriff, and he gets a pretty decent amount of screen time. And he also, I'm going to spoil it. He gets killed in a pretty awesome scene. And I'm going to say another spoiler here. The second build cast member behind Gary Busey gets top billing, but he's not really the main character. But Everett McGill, who played Big Ed on Twin Peaks, which this guy's awesome. But he plays the reverend of the town, who later on it's revealed that he is the werewolf, and he's a very menacing person. Like, as far as in person, he seems like it doesn't really show him that much being nice. It doesn't when you see him doing his reverend sermons, the first time you see him, it actually doesn't even get a close-up of him, which is a little weird. But he comes up and he starts talking, and then he's kind of in the background of what's going on, because it shows what Marty, Corey Haim's character, is doing, and his friend and the sister. But before he's revealed to be the werewolf, after there's a part in the film where a bunch of the villagers get together and they go try to get the werewolf, and there's all this fog, and it's a pretty cool scene. But then there's all this fog, and they can't see, and the werewolf's under the fog, and he starts killing a bunch of them. He kills like maybe 4 or 5 of them, and then after that it cuts to the funeral, and you see all these caskets in a row, and then all the reverend's doing the ceremony, and then suddenly all the churchgoers suddenly start to turn into werewolves, and then the reverend wakes up and he's dripping sweat, and he's just like, this has got to stop. So that's a pretty big tell that he is the werewolf, but he could just, at that point, you can maybe dismiss it. But I knew he's the werewolf anyway because I read the book. But later on, he's very menacing. At one point, he corners the kid on a wheelchair. There's a chase scene because the kid's motorcycle can go really fast. He runs him off the road, and he's about to kill him, I guess. He's definitely going to kill him, but then he gets like interrupted by another adult coming up. But he's very menacing, and he also, on top of that, and this is like a psychological thing with the werewolf character. Like, the kid starts writing him letters telling him he should kill himself, but since he is a reverend, he doesn't want to kill himself, because to him that's the worst sin. If he kills himself, he'll definitely go to hell. But he kind of justifies his behavior with using that as a crutch. Another one of the people, a woman that he kills, was actually took a bunch of pills, and she was going to kill herself because she was pregnant out of wedlock, and he kills her. So he uses that as an excuse, like, hey, I killed her, so I saved her from eternal damnation. But he doesn't. Maybe he saved her, but all the other people, like, what? You can't justify that. And he wants to kill this little kid, and I guess maybe he's like, oh, he's in a wheelchair anyway, so he's not going to have that good a life. But I don't know. But it's interesting that he's able to justify that, and then become the monster, and then the monster who has an excuse for doing what he's doing, and he thinks that he's doing righteous work. That's how he's able to, in his mind, say that. Now, the film does end near Halloween. It doesn't really make a big deal out of Halloween. The last part of the film takes place at Halloween, but there's a little mention of it. We're going out of town, but then the climax happens, but it doesn't happen until 3 o'clock in the morning. But it's even though it doesn't necessarily take place entirely on Halloween, or it does feel like a kind of Halloween film to me, especially because of the werewolf. And the werewolf, by the way, looks pretty good. I guess it looks a little bit like a bear, but it looks like, to me, it looks like what a werewolf would probably look like. The design's fairly simple, but it doesn't. But it looks really good. Apparently, the producer didn't like the werewolf costume, but Stephen King liked it, and so did the director. And this was the only film that the director directed. The werewolf is shown sparingly in most of the film. You don't see him very good. You see his arms. You see him like. They do a good job of not showing him until near the end, when he does a transformation in front of the sheriff, which looks pretty cool. Well, I guess the first time you see him, his face pretty good is when he gets the firecracker into the eye. But then the transformation is a pretty decent transformation. It's not American Werewolf in London good, but it's still pretty impressive, and it's it's cool. And apparently they originally hired like a dancer or ballet dancer to play the werewolf, but they weren't happy with this performance. So Everett McGill, who plays the character that turns into the werewolf, actually plays the werewolf most of the time on screen, and he does an excellent job as far as I can tell. I don't know which scenes he is the werewolf and then which ones he's not. I've seen most of them, but the werewolf is fairly convincing to me, and even when you see it fully, it's pretty well done. Now, let's take a look at this Scream Factory's collector's edition. Now, I'll point out that they previously did release a Blu-ray collector's edition with original artwork, and I really like this artwork. Unfortunately, I didn't get the slipcover with this one. This one does not have the same transfer as this one. This is a brand new 4K transfer, and it looks fairly terrific. Let's take a look at the inside of it. So you got the same deal here, and on On the inside of the here, you have a 4K and a Blu-ray. Now the Blu-ray does have a 4K scan, so it looks very good as well. Even though it's not a 4K disc, it looks, the transfer on that Blu-ray is significantly an upgrade from this. Now there are some scenes, especially some scenes that take place inside of a bar, that look really red, and it's probably just the way that they were shot. But it does have a nice, even though they look red as shit, it does have a nice feel to it. A lot of the exterior day scenes in particular look very, very well done. The colors are just popping in this 4K, and you don't see a lot of film grain here. I mean, the film grain is very tight there, so it's there, but it's not distracting, you know. And there's a lot of clarity and a lot of detail, especially in some of the scenes. But a lot of the scenes are intentionally hiding things that they don't want you to see, and all that black in the nighttime scenes, and they're able to really bring down the levels, bring down the darkness there, and the contrast up, and it looks very nice. And I'd recommend the 4K over the original Blu-ray, even though I do like the artwork on the original Blu-ray. I don't know, ever since I saw this to begin with, I've always enjoyed this movie. I think it's very has a nice feel to it, and there's a fairly unsettling scene where his friend gets killed, and then he's flying a kite and with a smiley face on it, and it has like blood all over it, and that's some pretty cool visuals throughout the film. So I'm going to go ahead and rate Silver Bullet with five stars being the highest, and of course 1 or 0 being the lowest. But I'm going to rate this 4 stars for the film. I'm going to rate it 4 stars for Screen Factory's packaging. The packaging may be leaning towards a 3.5, but they still did a good job on their packaging, and the 4K transfer especially, it's very, very well done. And this film, I really like. This is one I can watch again. Like, you know, it's one that I can rewatch, but it may just be because it's one that I put some time into when I was younger, and it has a nostalgia factor for me. The werewolf showdown is pretty cool. It is simple, and that's the thing about the film. It doesn't go overboard. Like, they make one silver bullet, and Gary Busey's character goes to get the guy to make the silver bullet, and it's a big deal. And the guy makes the silver bullet, and he suspects, or he knows, that it's for a werewolf. And it's kind of implied, like he questions it, but it doesn't finish the scene. You don't see what Gary Busey's character tells him, but he knows that they're doing something like that with the silver bullet, and the guy's kind of teary-eyed about it. It's a really cool scene, and the climax is with the final werewolf attack. It doesn't go overboard with Gary Busey does his own stunts. Apparently, it gets thrown across the room a few times, and pretty crazy. Anyway, I really enjoy this film. Let me know what you think about it, and in the comments below. And if you haven't done so already, if you go ahead and like this video and subscribe. I'm Dave Watkins. Thanks for watching!